Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about French interior architect turned watch designer Alain Cyberstein. But before we get into that subject, let's go into my magical intro. So hello guys, I'm back and we're going to talk today about French interior architect turned into watchmaker or watch designer Alain Cyberstein. Alain Cyberstein, back in the late 80s to the mid 90s, he caught thunder lightning. His watches were the watch to have. You know, the only people that were using and wearing his watches were, you know, entertainers, athletes, you know, very, very, very wealthy people. You know, this is a watch brand, like I said again, from the late 80s to the mid 90s, 97 to 97. This brand caught lightning. Even if you had, at that time, you had a Patek Philippe or you had a Audemars Piguet or even a Rolex, but you didn't have an Island Cyberstein in your hand. You know, you didn't have the grill, you know, you didn't have the grill in your hand. You had to have that watch. You know, for you to be like, hey, that person is up there on a different level, you had to have the Alain Cyberstein. You know, it's like the same thing like today. You know, you might have a Patek Philippe, a Rolex, or an Audemars Piguet, but you don't have a Richard Mille. You know, yeah, okay, so you have a Patek, so you have a Rolex, so you have an Audemars Piguet, but you don't have a Richard Mille. And that was the same thing happening back then in the late 80s, mid 90s. If you didn't have an Alain Cyberstein on your hand, it's like, you know, you were just, you know, a regular Joe. But if you had an Alain Cyberstein on your hand, you were not a regular Joe. You were a musician, a singer, an athlete, a race car driver. Does it sound something from, you know, from today, from 2022, you know? Sounds something similar? You had to be somebody big. And you know, he is a French interior architect, and he turned into watchmaking, and his watches caught lightning, thunder lightning, and everybody wanted to have one of them. I mean, but the prices were just, you know, unreachable. I mean, you can buy a Rolex in the 80s for, I don't know, $8,000, $7,000, you know, and so, you know, you can buy an AP for I don't know, $6,000, $7,000, and the same thing with Patek. You know, those numbers, you know, are the same numbers, but you couldn't get an Island Cyberstein for $5,000. You just couldn't. They were, you know, $20,000, $25,000, $35,000, $40,000, $50,000. So they were kind of untouchable, you know. His watches were very colorful, very funky, very psychedelic, you know. It was just a different watch. If you've never seen one, it's just very colorful, and you know, and the hands on the watch are very funky, you know. They were just you know, real different watches. But everyone wanted to have one of those watches because they were it. So, you know, he had a real good run, like I said, from I would say from 91 to 98. He was it. He was everything. And then another watch brand came in and knocked them off their pedestal, you know, knocked them off. And that watch brand was Jacob and Company. And he had another run for a while too, and you know, only, you know, again, movie stars and singers, the entertainment business had Jacob's watches, you know. Jacob and Company were giving out their watches to very big people, and everybody wanted to have a Jacob and Company watch, you know. You might have the Fabulous Three, you know, the AP, the Patek, and the Rolex, but you didn't have a Jacob, so you know, you were not somebody big. And he had a real good run. He had another good run, I would say, from I would say from 98 to 2000 and 2007, you know, was Jacob. And then after Jacob and Company, another watch brand came and knocked off Jacob from the pedestal. And that was who? Frank Mille. See that? Align Cyberstein, Jacob and Company, Frank Mille. And you know, again, Frank Mille, the same thing, doing the same thing, giving their watches to the entertainment business, athletes, just very, very wealthy people have their watches. And then another watch brand that it's been around for a while too, came and knocked out Frank Mille, and that was who? Hublot. And Hublot, you know, had a good run, and they were just doing their watches, and everybody wanted the big bang, big bang, big bang. And Hublot was the one to have. You might have, again, the Rolex, the AP, and the Pateks, but you didn't have a Hublot on. It's like, so what? You don't have a Hublot on. And that watch was really, you know, just doing real big things, Hublot, until they started making a lot of different editions. Limited edition this, limited edition that. Every watch brand they made was a limited edition on Hublot. And then this new guy, new kid on the block came along by the name of Richard Mille and just squashed everyone off. You know, just squashed everybody with their watches. But as you can see, like I said again, you had Align Cyberstein, you had Jacob and Company, you have Frank Mille, you had Hublot. At the same time, Frank Mille and Hublot were there, Hublot and Frank Mille. But then you had Richard Mille come in and just squash all these watch brands. And the reason I'm making this video, do you think that the same thing is gonna happen to Richard Mille? That someone else is gonna come along now and squash Richard Mille? Because Richard Mille's prices are just, you know, they're just unreachable. I don't even want to use the word untouchable. They're just unreachable. You have a Richard Mille watch that can cost you, any Richard Mille watch can cost you, you know, $100,000. But if you go back now to Align Cyberstein, back in the 80s, mid 90s, his watches will cost $40,000, $35,000, $50,000, which to me, that was the equivalent to the Richard Mille. This is why I compare very, very much Align Cyberstein to Richard Mille. You know, different decades, you know, different years, but you know, it levels out the same number prices, you know. So I've been thinking lately that maybe this is the same thing that's gonna happen to Richard Mille, you know, that happened to Align Cyberstein and Jacob and Frank Mille and Hublot. I'm thinking it can happen to Richard Mille, because his prices are just out of control, and right now with the recession that we have, you know, I mean, I see their prices right now, Richard Mille prices just dropping right now, and I mean dropping, they're dropping. So who knows, with this hurt Richard Mille at this moment, with the situation that's happening around the globe, with a recession, with a war, with just so many things happening. And that's the reason why I'm using the watch brand Align Cyberstein with Richard Mille, because they were, you know, the same ideals, you know. They were the ones that would give their watches, Align Cyberstein would give their watches to movie stars, entertainers, singers, sports, athletes, and the same thing that Richard Mille does too, you know, the entertainment business, sports, car races, and so on and so on. So I've been thinking lately that maybe this can happen. This thunder lightning can also happen to Richard Mille, and boom, just crash like these watches that I've been talking to you about, you know, the Cyberstein, the Jacob, the Frank, the Hublot, and now Richard Mille. So who knows, maybe it doesn't happen. But if you don't know about Align Cyberstein, take a look into his watches. They were really, really big, you know, back in, like I said, back in the 90s, they were the watch. If you could have a Patek Philippe in your hand, and you had a Align Cyberstein in your wrist, you were it. Oh man, who's that guy? You were it. You were it. To all of you out there that know who, you only know about Richard Milles and Jacob and Hugh Blood and Frank Mueller's, there was a watch brand by the name of Align Cyberstein, and they were it. They were untouchable. This watch brand was, I mean, you really wanted to have one of those wristwatches on your wrist. You really did. And I mean, when you look at it, you're probably gonna, laugh and smile at the way the watch was designed, but that was the watch that everyone wanted. They wanted an Align Cyberstein. And I compared them very much with their marketing, their way of doing things, their branding with Richard Mille. So when you have a chance, look for the watch brand Align Cyberstein. Align Cyberstein. And they were, you'll like their watches. You'll find them kind of funky. You find them kind of, psychedelic, but you're gonna understand a little bit what I'm saying. They were very, I compare them very much to what a Richard Mille is today. Back in the 80s to, you have Richard Mille today in the millennium, 2022. So, they caught thunder lightning and they were it. Like I said again, it didn't matter if you had a Rolex on your wrist or Patek Philippe or nada más piquete. If you didn't have an Align Cyberstein on your wrist, you were a nobody. So look into Align Cyberstein. They were the watch from the I would say from the late 80s to the very mid 90s. I would say to 97, somewhere 97, 96. They were it. I mean, this guy was untouchable. Align Cyberstein is a French interior architect, and he turned into watch designer. And he is very well known in the watch industry. He was one of the big ones, he was one of the big ones. So when you have a chance, look into Align Cyberstein so you can see what I mean. I'm not saying, that's it's gonna happen to Richard Mille too, but I'm telling you, he had a real good run and boom, he went down and that was it. He can never get back up again. So look into Align Cyberstein so you can learn something about that watch brand. Okay? Well guys, I really hope you enjoyed my video and you learned something from Align Cyberstein watch brand. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And gentlemen, take care and brush your hair.
또 이제 와서 문제를 보자.